Good morning and welcome to the All Things M365 Conference Kickoff Session. My name is Karen Mann and I'm an M365 Administrator here at the North Carolina Department of Information Technology. We're excited to present today's conference, which will include 7 sessions designed to help you get the most out of Microsoft 365 products. There's a link to the conference agenda in the chat. If you're new to Teams, I'm sharing a slide that shows how to use the various buttons on your screen. First, we're going to hear from Mick DeGrazia, NCDIT Senior Director of Enterprise Operations, who will give the welcome address. Then Keith Briggs, NCDIT's Director of Enterprise Architecture and Innovation, will deliver the keynote address, Innovation and the Drive of Human Productivity. And now I will turn it over to Mick to give the welcome address.
So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 All Things M365 Conference, where we'll be spending the day learning how to power productivity with M365. We have a lot of really great content lined up for you today, and we hope that you'll take full advantage of our impressive agenda. We have experts standing by to lead sessions on exciting topics such as Power BI, Power Automate. You'll have the opportunity to learn about building beautiful intranet sites in SharePoint, how to maintain a lean inbox, and how to use M365 tools to build applications and platforms that will allow your agency to leverage data to improve agency service delivery. As you participate in today's sessions and you hear about what may be new technologies or new use cases for more familiar technologies, I challenge you to think about novel ways in which you can use these tools in your agency to transform just one manual process, just one customer service experience, just one spreadsheet-driven decision-making tool. I know you have them. We all do. And now we have the tools to change that, to transform, to modernize these systems and processes into something more supportable and manageable over time. So let's take this opportunity. Let's use these tools and help improve the way we get things done in support of state services to citizens. Look, the challenges to innovation in the public sector are numerous. We don't have the same resources as similar-sized organizations in the private sector. We have bureaucracy, politics, culture that make innovation really difficult. Different goals and priorities makes collaboration a challenge between teams and agencies. But for every hurdle we face innovating, there are 100, 1,000 citizens that could benefit from improved services and support from our agencies, making the effort worth it on our part. Innovation comes at the intersection of culture, experience, and knowledge. So I encourage you to take your unique individual background and what you learned today and talk to others about their experience and their ideas. Keep the conversation going after today's conference. Together, let's find new ways to accomplish our work with a big picture of state services in mind. And now is a great time to innovate. DIT is working to help close the digital divide in North Carolina, distributing over $2.5 billion in federal and state funds to help build infrastructure for broadband and to provide devices to those that don't have them, along with education to ensure our friends and neighbors stay safe on the internet. As DIT works to close the gap for 1.1 million North Carolina households affected by lack of access, your work innovating and digitizing state services at the agency level will have more reach than ever before. Now, we all know that artificial intelligence is becoming more and more integrated into the tools that we use every day. AI's promise of making our lives easier by summarizing email threads and outlining meeting action items, creating draft documents, is now becoming a reality. And it's creating new avenues for productivity, creativity, and even new career aspirations. While AI has been around for decades, its recent integration into consumer-facing tools has led to an explosion in new use cases. This proliferation of creative solutions continues to push new technology advancements, making AI ever more useful, and at the same time presenting enterprises with new security and privacy challenges. At NCDIT, we're excited and hopeful about how AI can help innovate and transform state government. But we also know that we must be mindful, measured, and unified in our approach and how we leverage and manage this technology across the state. NCDIT will soon be releasing a framework to help state agencies navigate and access the benefits, impacts, and risks associated with using AI in their operations to ensure that we all use AI safely, responsibly, and ethically, while maintaining public trust and protecting the privacy of North Carolina residents and businesses. The framework is aligned with existing privacy laws and IT policies, and is based on the Fair Information Practice Principles. It also incorporates standards from NIST, guidance from the federal government and White House, along with industry best practice. Before NCDIT rolls out any generative AI capabilities and products such as Microsoft Copilot, we will ensure that they meet the cybersecurity and privacy standards and align with this framework. NCDIT encourages you to approach AI with the same enthusiasm and curiosity, looking for new ways to leverage technology to produce better insights, improve your productivity, or defend the state against fraud, waste, and abuse. And at the same time, we remind you to be mindful of the coming framework and the need to align with statewide security and privacy standards. Keep innovating, keep imagining, and keep thinking big. And that brings us back to today's conference, where we hope we can inspire some of that creative thinking, leading to new ideas, innovation in all levels of state government. And then in the spirit of taking advantage of our full agenda, I'd like to remind you that as you look through the sessions that we have planned, if you see a session that you want to register for, you still have time. Just look at the chat section of Microsoft Teams and you'll see a link to registration there. If you have any difficulty at all, please reach out to conference organizers and we'll get you registered. We'll get you signed up and get you the link. And now I happen to have the distinct honor and privilege of introducing today's keynote speaker. Keith Briggs has made a career innovating in both the private and public sectors. He manages innovation for DIT at an enterprise level, leading statewide adoption of new technologies such as robotic process automation, data analytics, and of course, artificial intelligence. I'm so excited to continue the conversation and learn more about how innovation inspires creativity, fosters collaboration, and empowers individuals and organizations to achieve more, pushing the boundaries of what may be achievable. And without further ado, I present to you today's keynote speaker, NCDIT's Director of Architecture and Innovation, Keith Briggs. Keith, it's all yours.
Wow. I don't know if I can match that, Mick.
I think you might be able to.
Intro, but,
I think you may be okay.
Pretty good stuff. Interesting stuff. Conference perspective. I love conferences because they're an opportunity to learn. And I think I feel heading into a conference, maybe a little apprehensive, a little nervous, but I always feel, energized when I leave. And I think this is another great opportunity for all of us to take the benefit of the conference, the learning experience, maybe some opportunities to grow ourselves and go forward. I do have a presentation. Let me see if I can get this thing up and running. And we're good. All right. So presentation today is really around innovation and the drive of human productivity. A lot of things that Mick kind of introduced us to on our welcome kind of are reiterated in this presentation. Of course, we have to talk about AI, but it's a lot more fundamental than that. It's really about us as individuals, as humans, how we actually innovate, how we create an environment of innovation, and what can we do to support the organization, the team, the little units that we have, so that we're driving improvement every day. I also think being my central thought all the time, that innovation itself becomes the catalyst for everything that we do. So I can be very frustrated by something that I'm doing in a manual, repeatable task. And I have to think there has to be a better way to do this. I don't just accept the process. Now, it may take time to change. There's influences, there's environmental factors, there's other people in that flow, there's tools, there's acceptable practices, there's, as Mick said, security, privacy. We have to take all of those things into account. But innovation doesn't have to be this big, huge thing, all encompassing. Innovation can be small, little steps of improvement that over time really make a difference. So consider this, if you don't have anything else as a takeaway from the keynote, take this. Innovation itself becomes a catalyst. So if you can make a change, then you can drive future changes. If you've ever listened to me before, you've ever been around me, I always have a story. I love stories. I think life's examples are the most important examples that we can take with us. So I have an example of what I think of as an innovation, but also an innovation challenge. So I've got two dates here, 2008, 2010. And as I was developing the conversation, I was thinking to myself, well, what are some interesting factors that we think about that influence how society really innovates? So I thought back in time of really two examples that I thought, again, funny. They're, not too long ago, but long enough ago to be, if they weren't really memorable, they wouldn't be here. 2008, I was traveling a lot for work, and there was a lot going on in the world. We just had a recession. Environment was changing. There was a need to innovate in certain areas. And so I want to go back and look at the news. So here's the first thing that's in the news in 2008. Who's to blame for $4 gas? Well, for those that were really driving at the time and really more importantly paying for gas, what we saw was that gas prices went from basically $1 at the turn of the century or 8 years earlier to $4 being historically high for the time, and really crushing for families, that needed transportation to get to jobs, schools, live life. Innovation or perceived innovation. Prius sales, everybody hopefully is familiar with the Toyota Prius hybrid, one of the preeminent hybrid cars of our time. 2008, Prius sales topped $1 million. Want one? Better move fast. Well, if we think about our environment, it isn't so hard to imagine that as gas prices rise to all-time historic numbers, our need for alternative, better solutions arise and innovation takes place. At the same time, Here I am traveling. Gas prices are really high. I'm a member of the Hertz Gold, #1 Gold membership. And what I would do is book a car rental. I'd show up and then say, Mr. Briggs, there's your car. And I didn't even pick. I just get in the car and went. Well, gas prices are high. Priuses, are hard to get. I go into the Hertz dealer or Hertz rental, and the car they give me is a Suburban. Makes sense. There was low demand. No demand for Suburbans. Probably got 10 miles to the gallon. Probably had a 40-gallon tank. $160 to fill up. Why not? Nobody's renting them. 2 years later, Toyota investigates case of runaway Prius. They had an accelerator issue. It was a famous story in California where a guy is being chased by police on a highway, and he's out of control, can't stop. They eventually get him to stop, and it turns out that he had an accelerator pedal stuck. Short time afterwards, the U.S. is to probe Prius brake problems. Another issue. A lot of Priuses on the road now. What are they going to do? Interesting enough, times changed. 2009, 2010 saw a reduction in gas prices go from somewhere around $4 a gallon down to about two and change. The demand for the Prius greatly reduces. You have two problems, and you have lower gas prices. Interestingly enough, not shown here, SUVs become one of the most popular vehicles in the U.S. again, largely because of the dropping of gas prices in our short-term memory. I go on another business trip. I go to the Hertz dealer in Boston, Massachusetts. I step up to the #1 Gold. My car is ready. What do I get? Prius. I took that as a way because I literally was leaving the lot with the Prius thinking, is my brakes going to fail or is my accelerator going to get stuck? But that isn't really the message that I want you guys to take away in this meeting. I really want you guys to think about our need drives change. But part of the challenge with innovation and making innovation stick is it's got to be a part of the culture. If we have short-term memories, or we get past the initial problem but not really solving the overall problem, we may not really get the benefit of the innovation that we expect. Now, before I move on, I will also mention that the lead-in of the Prius and the adoption of hybrid has largely driven some of our innovations today with electric vehicles, which I think everybody would agree is much more predominant in the marketplace now. All right. I sent Karen a write-up for the talk, and you guys can read it. Advancements in technology, process, mindset propel us towards greater efficiency. Mick talked a little bit about that. Our conversations will dwell into ways to innovate, inspire, create, foster, collaborate. Again, Mick talked a little bit about collaboration and thinking about things. And through our dynamic interplay of ingenuity and adaptation, innovation becomes the catalyst that fuels our relentless pursuit of productivity. How do we do more with less? How do we provide better services to citizens? Things like that. And ultimately shape the future where possibilities are limitless and achievements are boundless. Now, what I didn't provide, Karen, was the fact that I had used a prompt to generate it. Now, here's a great example of innovation. Not the generative AI itself. I mean, that's fabulous. It probably took me a minute to develop that comment, where if I had sat down and had to think about it, it would have taken me much longer. But what I'm showing you there with the anthropic picture is that a year and a half ago, there was a new term in the industry. It was called prompt engineering. And it was all about learning how we would use these tools to generate original new content from Gen AI that we can use. But if you've had any experience using ChatGPT or Edge, Copilot for Edge, or any of the others, this happens to be Claude, what you would see is that you probably will prompt it, you'll probably ask it a question, and it won't really be what you want. And you have to do it again, and you have to do it again. You may even feed some more information into it. But you eventually become good at creating the right prompt to get the right response or the right context. Well, here we are a year later, a year and a half later, to a relatively new area, the science of prompt engineering. And what Anthropic has produced is they've produced a Gen AI prompt that will actually help you prompt the Gen AI. So what you don't see really in the small refined picture is that you actually use natural English language. You describe what you're trying to get out. And what Anthropic does through this tool is it actually generates prompts that you can use in Gen AI that will be the most successful and the most accurate in getting your response and your intent. Now, that may seem intuitive, but think about the iterations of what that is. The first prompt, ChatGPT, came out, and it really didn't give us any instruction. A year later, not only did we have a better understanding, but now I have a tool that allows for people that are learning how to prompt a way to use Gen AI to actually create the prompt that creates the creativity. And that's what innovation is about. All right. I want you guys to take a pause for a second and go back to something that's much older than Gen AI. Probably the only thing that I can recall that pops to my mind, an image, a reference to innovation, is this thing called the greatest thing since sliced bread. And we've all probably used it. We've probably already used that term many, many times in our lives. We might have used it as a joke. You might have had a Trivial Pursuit question of it. But have you ever really stopped to think about it? Why is sliced bread the epitome of American innovation? And if you actually do a little research and you really think about it, it does become a best descriptor on how we want to look at innovation as a whole for any product. So a little bit of detail. Bread's been around for 14,000 years. Sure, it was a staple, a key source of energy, food source of energy for humans for 14,000 years. In some areas through our timelines, bread and water were the only nutrients that people got. But why slicing it matters? Well, it really changed the way we consumed it. It was also a way to introduce levels of consistency and quality control. So bread was very inconsistent. The use of bread was very inconsistent. But more importantly, some aspects of bread and how people consumed it and how people actually got access to it changed. And that's why sliced bread really matters. So probably a bunch of us have heard of this, but many probably haven't thought about it. But before sliced bread, there was no packaging of bread. Now, I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. There was also increased handling of bread. So when we think about the hygiene or the fact that this is the primary source of food that I have, but it's been handled by many, many people in the transfer from making to eating, that chances are it could be the leading foodborne illness carrier. That's pretty scary. Also, and again, although people ate bread, when sliced bread came about, at least in America, and this holds true for Europe, and this holds true for Japan and other countries as well, it greatly increased the consumption of sliced bread into our normal routines, right? And our modern normal routines. It became a convenience, which means that I could eat it quickly. I could add it to other food things like sandwiches, and I could be on the go. In 1943, during wartime, there was actually a moratorium on sliced bread because it was using steel to make bread slicers. And so they banned sliced bread, even if you already had a slicer, because it created an unfair competition to bakeries that had them and bakeries that couldn't get them. But this ban was so unpopular in America that it was overturned in just 2 months, and there was still a steel shortage. And it's kind of crazy to think about. We're worrying about sliced bread during wartime, but when things impact humans, they matter. Sliced bread also became part of the popular culture as it represented modernity and progress, right? So when we talk about sliced bread being the epitome, we can think about why it matters, and then we can think about how we innovate in other areas, maybe following that same path. At the end of the day, sliced bread is deemed to improve everyday life. As with many innovations, which we'll see as we move forward, sliced bread also became a major influencer of other industries. It inspired, manufacturers to develop new products and prioritize convenience and other consumer satisfaction elements that largely hadn't existed up until then. And then overall, it does become the vision of innovation for America. Here's a couple little side items. We talked about the influence. The toaster was actually invented before the mass use of sliced bread, but it largely was unused. It stayed on store shelves. It wasn't a part of every household, and it wasn't until the invention of sliced bread, the mass production of sliced bread, and the mass consumption of sliced bread, that toasters then become an everyday household item. And so if you think about the industry of the toaster, it greatly was impacted by that and all the innovations of toasters, right? Now, I don't have a toaster in my house, but I do have an air fryer, and I do have a toaster oven, so I can do regular toast if I want. And I find that the air fryer and the toaster oven is an everyday convenience that my family can't live without. And to think it might not have even come about if we didn't slice bread. Kind of crazy. The same thing with jams and spreads. So when sliced bread came about, the invention, the creation, the preservative, and the use of jams and spreads greatly increased, which created opportunities for more to enter the market and giving humans more nutritional capabilities, or maybe more opportunities for convenience, so much so that a very common breakfast for the workforce and for kids growing up was toast and jam. I know I had it a lot. All right, we want to move on back to technology because that's a much more interesting area. This is a highly used long-term timeline of technology. It's an eye chart. You can't read it. But what it does show is that technology innovation, or the use of tools, machines, and systems, have been happening for a very, very long time, 3.4 million years. The first known tool use by a humanoid species was approximately 3.4 million years ago. And what this really does show, though, is that innovation takes place. The time it takes to introduce the next innovation gets shorter. And that's what we're experiencing. Everybody on this call has probably lived 20 to 70 years, and you all probably can look at how innovation has become more compacted and potentially more influential over time. We see that controlled use of fire was 1 million years ago. We think, I didn't know this, but the creation of a bed, that probably would have been the first thing I invented, was a bed, 200,000 years ago. Agriculture, 10,000, gunpowder, 1,000, steam engine, 200. The modern computer or computing, 50s, 50, 70 years ago, in the 50s. And now we have AI. And AI has been around for a while, but the popular use, or I say everyday use of AI, is literally changing everything on the fly. It literally is changing everything on the fly. So now we have to get back to the people part. We got a little bit of history of it, but you have to get back to the people part, right? So Mick talked about an environment of innovation. And honestly, that environment of innovation starts with us. It starts with you, it starts with us. And it's really about the environment we live in. And Mick also mentioned that it's kind of tough to innovate in state. You know, we've got lots of rules. We have a responsibility to our citizens, but it doesn't preclude us from having the opportunity to innovate. We really do have to have the ability to change over time. Our citizens will expect us to change. They'll expect us to modernize. I would argue that we're probably in this really, really interesting inflection point where the modern everyday citizen is now digitally aware. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was probably untrue. The average citizen may have not been digitally aware. They may have been digitally aware, but they weren't using digital, systems in everyday use. But as we continue to grow older, and our younger generations that have only been around technology and digital environments become the mainstream, their expectations on us and how they get services are going to require change, right? So culture of an environment can play a significant role in our innovation. And we really need to make sure that that culture values change. If you're in an environment that's been doing the same thing over and over again, you really need to question why. And even if that thing works, there may be other ways to make it work better. We also have to have an environment that is acceptable of risk. Now, we're not talking about putting our data at risk or our services at risk. But when we talk about risk taking, it means, hey, I have an idea that may change the way I do something, and I need an environment that lets me try to see if that actually comes true. And so don't be afraid of taking a chance. And if you're in an environment that really doesn't want you to take a chance, investigate why. Raise it up. Share your thoughts. Drive a change in the environment so that we can actually take risks and foster the innovation we do. Now, I wanted to give you guys some examples of workplace cultures that are popularly known as a culture of innovation. Many of us, I have two here, have iPhones. I have an iWatch. I have iPods. No, AirPods. I don't have an iPod anymore. AirPods. And I would argue that I can't live without them, and I also argue that they're the most convenient thing that I have. Apple's culture of innovation and really the strive for protection in the consumer product has made them one of the most valuable companies on the planet. But if you think about Apple's history, they struggled for a long time. They had innovative products that was not really seen as a mainstream adoption, so much so that Apple went through a period of time not too long ago, 20 years ago, in which they could have become very irrelevant. And if you follow the stock market, you probably could have got Apple stock in the early 2000s for, single dollars. And now you'd be very very wealthy person if you had invested back then. Kind of a relation, Pixar. So Pixar was a company that really focused on digital capabilities, video, and not so much in the animation stuff, but video in the early days. And they rotated to get involved in animation. And their culture was around listening to each other and being open and willing to receive strong feedback as a way of continuous improvement. There's a great book. I don't know if anybody's read it. It's called Creativity, Inc. And it talks about how they developed that culture of listening and feedback for them to grow. And of course, everybody's familiar with Pixar. There's some famous movies, Cars, Toy Story. The relationship to Apple, obviously, is Steve Jobs, if you didn't know that. But it's worth doing a little investigation or research on how Pixar really drove that cultural mindset of innovation. We hear about M365 or Microsoft 365. Microsoft is another good example, not to be embarrassing on anybody's agenda, but Microsoft has reinvented itself. Over the last decade, Microsoft has really transformed to be a very different company than it was 2 decades ago. And some of the reasons why is Microsoft fosters creativity through continuous learning. They realize that they have to change in order to succeed, and that starts with the employee base. If I'm an expert in Linux, or if I'm an expert in Unix, or I'm an expert in COBOL, or something that may be no longer cutting edge or the future, as an employee, I need to continue to do a great job in that space, but I also need to take on responsibility of my own continuous learning to move into something new. Mick talked about that, driving new careers. P&G. You may not know Procter & Gamble as a household name, maybe you do, but I would argue every single one of you buys P&G products every day. Your house is probably filled with them, and you maybe not even know it. And part of P&G's culture is about creativity in daily operations. Every day, they're looking at creative ways of not only developing new products, but how those products are developed. And then the last one, albeit Tesla's had some negative news lately, and they have a very interesting leader. Tesla's goal is to constantly seek supreme ideas. That's their term, not mine. And that's something that's not a bad idea. At the end of the day, I'm eventually going to succeed if my goal is to always look for the supreme ideas and then develop those ideas. So I would encourage all of you to think about those role models, not necessarily the names, but what they do, and incorporate that into your own space. All right, empowering humans, our teams, our organization as a whole. I'll start with the bottom. I mentioned to you that innovation doesn't have to be large and grand. Innovation can be actually small. It can be small and growing. The Toyota Way, famous book on the Toyota production system, and yes, I'm tying it back to the Prius, has a notion, a Japanese term called Kaizen. And it's the basic notion that continuous improvement translates into substantial productivity and quality gains over time. So if we have a complex workflow and we sit back and we try to solve that complex workflow from end to end, it may be so arduous that we never, ever improve. However, if we sit back and we look at components of that workflow and we try to solve components of that workflow, that innovation over time will improve the entire system. And that's what Kaizen is about. In the Toyota Way, the book Toyota Way talks about lean manufacturing and Six Sigma and all those things around process improvement that we all can use. even though it's a manufacturing book or a book based on manufacturing, it's a worthy review for us as we do our jobs every day, because we are all in an assembly line of some way or another. We're doing repeatable work, and we really need to look at that work every day to say, how do we improve? Now, it takes effort too. It's not just you. It takes the organization. We talk about culture, but it also takes peers. It also takes tolerance over peers. It takes collaboration. It takes leadership, and again, the environment. Right away, if you're not doing it, you should be comfortable sharing your thoughts and ideas. But you need to be equally comfortable and willing to understand others in the group. Your idea may inspire somebody else in the team to come back with even a better idea. And productivity is based upon acceptance of that idea and moving it forward, not competition or being mad that your idea is not as good as the next. You have the next idea. That's what innovation is about. Openness in the environment is essential. You have to be able to be open and willing to do things and learn new things in order to be productive. Collaboration, you've heard. Diversity, you've heard, is a key to our success. I would agree. I love our collaboration. I'm in the office today. The days that people in the office, I spend a part of the day talking to people about challenges we have. That's collaboration. Leaders, it starts with me. I need to make sure that I'm empowering everybody around me to be a change advocate, to drive innovation, and then I need to be able to be a champion if they actually raise ideas up. If they come to me with an idea, I have to champion that idea to either new ideas or implementation. And then we talked about the culture and fostering a safe environment that supports risk taking. If you're not seeing these things in your area, ask why. If you're seeing them in the area, add to it. Enhance what we're doing and move forward with your individual efforts as the organization moves forward with their organizational efforts. We're here for M365, all things M365. And probably what you'll see as the day develops is this opportunity that we have. The Mick talked a little bit about it, mentioned even AI and Copilot. These are things that are transforming around us. They're not only influencing what we have to do and what we can do, but they will be influential in how we do things in the future. And to me, the changes that are happening with automation, robotic process automation, AI, workflow tools, low code, no code, all those above, really create an endless opportunity that will be the catalyst for the next innovation that we create. For us, we need to inspire and iterate. We need that feedback. We talked about sharing an idea, getting some thought, coming back with another idea. Some ideas, we developed a mobile app not too long ago in another organization in the state. Leadership came to us and said, we want a mobile app. But they didn't know what they wanted from the mobile app. They just put pressure to get it done. They wanted to get a check mark. Well, the team that developed the mobile app started doing some research, meeting with businesses, what made sense. What we ended up developing was a state agency mobile app that was very functional in the areas that it needed to be, that we eventually got to. But very serendipitously, as we're building the technology to deliver the agency services, we had a bunch of internal things that were not working so well. And somebody came up with the idea of, hey, we can have an employee mobile app that we can easily deliver these other things through as an internal function. Next thing you know, everybody had the internal mobile app. It immediately connected us to each other. This was prior to Teams. It immediately gave us emergency notifications. It immediately delivered other information that was very important in our daily routines. And it was serendipitous because we didn't originally think about that until we were challenged with something else. And then I do think as innovation is a catalyst for other innovations, it also becomes a catalyst shift for innovation in itself. There's a thing called, I lost my thought. If your neighbor gets something, if your neighbor goes out and buys a brand new TV, keep it up with the Joneses. There's a philosophy around keeping up with the Joneses. The idea of that is really the culture that you're in. If everybody in your circle of influence is buying electric cars, it's going to influence your ideas and ideals on whether or not you should have an electric car. Well, if everybody around you is innovating and automating, more than likely you'll start to do that as well. And that's part of the cultural shift that we have. So keep driving it. Or if you're not driving it yet, get on board with it. As I mentioned, we're here for M365. It is really a limitless future for us in this area. I'm going to drop down to the bottom due to time, but we have workflow automation, artificial intelligence, RPA, chatbot, collaboration platforms, and intelligent automation, all available at our fingertips through our Microsoft portfolio. A few of you have reached out to me over the last couple of months as you've heard about some of the things like chatbot and RPA, saying, how can I get involved? That's part of the cultural influence. My recommendation for everybody is if you're not familiar with a product or a solution, start to learn about it. You may find that really basic workflows, data flows, small automation, small assistance, you can develop yourself. For the larger initiatives, you come up with the idea and you raise it up and maybe we take it on as a team. But this is why we're here today. I do want to circle back. So it's a joke. Have you heard of ChatGPT? If you haven't, call me after the meeting. But I presented this slide more than a year ago. And I compared, and I kid you not, this is the original slide. I compared ChatGPT as an inference to greater than sliced bread. The reason is because it is now intertwined, and it's generative AI, more so than ChatGPT because there's other tools out there. It's intertwined into all of our lives already in historic speed. ChatGPT came out in the fall of 22, and within 2 months, there were 100 million users active. If you follow it, there is a persistent 150 million user base of ChatGPT on a monthly basis still, a year and a half. So it hasn't died out as the news changes, as the sentiment changes. It's still progressing. It's also the fast and adopted web app. And the most important thing is it gave direct access to generative AI to everyone. It wasn't limiting to a certain capability. And if you haven't heard of ChatGPT, you probably should start looking for it. Now, we already compared the sliced bread to jam, toaster, other influences. And so we have to compare artificial intelligence as the driving force for other industries. And so there's some bad news. Amid explosive demand, America is running out of power. AI and the boom for clean tech manufacturing has pushed America to the brink. There was a funny little story I read about 6 months ago in which the state of California passed the most aggressive energy laws, basically being the first to remove combustion engines from the environment by some date. And at the same time, as that law was passed, the California energy grid couldn't keep up with air conditioning. And so when you convert all those combustion engines to electric demand cars, and you can't even currently support the energy demands, what's the future going to hold? Just recently, May of this month, Microsoft signs a critical deal that invests more than $100 billion in renewable energy. Why? Data centers and AI. CEO Sam Altman from OpenAI, funding the green energy moonshot as AI's power's demands grow to insatiable levels. And then the last one, AI's massive power consumption demands more innovative energy solutions. Now, I would argue that all of these things resonate with some sense of truth. And there's a lot of analysts out in the marketplace right now that are looking at there's no way we can produce the amount of energy needed that's calculated based upon the growth of AI use. And if you think about our energy consumption in the form of a measure, and I can't remember exactly how it's a megawatt, I believe. The US uses about 250 megawatts on an annual basis. Don't quote me on that. The expected demand within the next couple of years is more than double that. But what I think is going to happen, because I think AI is here to stay, and it's also being integrated into the fabric of our technology base and our human use and our convenience, that there's going to be two things that happen, and very quickly. AI will become more efficient. That's a good thing. And the demands on energy will greatly drive the innovation around energy creation and energy consumption. And what that may mean is that our ability to reduce greenhouse gases and other environmental factors, as well as lower the cost of fuels that are in the market, will all change, because need drives innovation. And I think these are the real big factors. If Microsoft is investing, if OpenAI is investing, if the industry is investing, and there's an innovation need, then it makes sense that those innovations will take place. We don't know what it will look like, but chances are within 2 or 3 years, maybe even sooner, we'll start to see totally new ways that energy is being created that we will all benefit from. And so hopefully you all take a little bit away from this presentation, maybe as an opportunity for motivation. I don't think there's any other time in state government than right now that we have to be able to really make an impact and change the way we do things that serve our citizens. And honestly, it's not the big thing. It's the little thing that you change. And so that's what I'm asking everybody here to do.